And our speaker will now be Carlos, right?
Thank you.
Since you're not up here.
Yes.
Right.
Just put it there now for convenience sake.
Okay.
All right.
Hang on, everybody.
Am I good there?
Okay, that's it. We're live now. Can anyone hear us? Hello?
I
Hello?
can turn it on to see. I heard that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
two.
I can hear you
That's,
great.
that's why I have mine on here so we can see.
Okay. Technical glitches.
Carlos has to literally be in two places at one time. But
Just like Jesus, double nature. Okay, so yes, I was saying if
Could you turn it down?
oh, I'm sorry. I usually turn it off.
Yes, thank you.
so, I was just saying I'm sorry about that. I was saying the buzzards are away, getting a much needed vacation in sunny Alabama, not Florida, but Alabama.
It's a good day.
So they will be back next Sunday, hopefully. So, all right. So basically, Anthony has been doing the Book of Luke, and we will continue that when Anthony comes back, especially the passage we left off where he got really excited. So if I did that, he would never forgive me. Luke 1:35, he says things. So I thought we might just go back a bit. We just finished the book of Zechariah last month, I think, or this week. And one of the things that struck me was, so this is called the restoration or conversion of the nations. And for the online people, I have PowerPoints there so they can follow, because I'll be doing, as I usually do, a lot of text, a lot of references, because it's a bit of a big subject. So we'll do the best we can right now. But one thing that struck me about the visions of Zechariah, at the closing of the visions in chapter 14, if you quickly go there, so the vision closes with basically the good time that comes. So as Anthony says, the prophets, the Old Testament prophets, are really about it's bad, very bad, and then at the last minute, at the last second, God will pull the world, the nations out of the fire, and the kingdom will come. So that's basically the prophetic word throughout the Old Testament. If you read Isaiah, even the Psalms, which has a lot of prophecy, which I hadn't really thought about. I was watching, we were watching one of the evangelical channels, which, a lot of the stuff they show there is good. And the person mentioned that the Psalms have a lot of prophecy in them, which I had never thought about. You always think of the Psalms as sort of like the Proverbs, good, ethical, like moral teachings, but it's very prophetic in nature. So if you see there in Zechariah 14:16, this is the thing that stood out for me as we finished the book of Zechariah. And that's the second slide there. 14:16. Then everyone who survives of all the nations. So we see that in the previous verses 12 to 15, God's judgment described as a plague, I believe, comes upon the nations that are going up against Jerusalem, sacking Jerusalem. And then God's judgment comes in verses 12 to 15. But then they survive. These pagan enemy nations that are attacking Jerusalem, they will have their own remnants, their own survivors. So it says here, so those survivors that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, Yahweh of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths. Now, the Feast of Booths is interesting, and I got a note there about Ezekiel 46 describes the same image of, in the kingdom, the nations keeping certain Torah feasts. Now, I'm not going to get, that's a separate subject of the one I want to focus on, about the reinstitution of the feast. It sounds like the Torah will be brought back in some shape or form, just like the temple will be rebuilt and the sacrifices will be restarted. And that's in Ezekiel 40 onward, that whole scenario, but I'm not going to touch that right now. I want to focus on this restoration point, which is very important for us, the Christian church. So this survival of the nations, of the remnants, is interesting because it brings to conclusion the fulfillment of the gospel. So if you see Genesis 12, and you don't have to go there, but I'll just briefly, we will read, we'll get us to read some sections, but right now this is a brief to give us context. So this is a fulfillment of the gospel, really, because in Genesis 12, Yahweh said to Abraham, go out from your land, remember? Genesis 12, 1 to 3, that's the slide there. Mm-hmm. Your relatives, so he tells them to go to this land, and Abraham goes. You know, he hears a voice. He didn't see anyone, he just heard a voice apparently, and he went, and that's the faith angle, right? Abrahamic faith of Abraham, the Church of God, right? This is what we're all about. And then he goes with a promise that he will not only bless Abraham, but everyone through Abraham, who becomes Abraham, the father of all nations, will be blessed. So that's right. That this is the gospel as we know it, the Jewish gospel, and this is reiterated, repeated, emphasized in Galatians 3:8, for example. In Scripture, says Paul, it is foreseen that God makes right the non-Jews, us, Gentiles, who believe God. Thus the Christian gospel was preached to Abraham ahead of time with these words, and they're the words of Genesis, with faith like yours, Abraham, all the nations will be blessed. So that's the restoration angle that we're looking at today. So the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant, the Abrahamic promise, which we call the gospel, the good news, is also highlighted in passages in Zechariah 8. That's the other angle, 8, 12 to 13. You don't have to go there. I'm just giving context. Oh, by the way, sorry. I'm going maybe too fast. If I'm going too fast, let me know. The first slide, if you can go back to the first slide of the links, all this and much more is on the COG blog post or blog site that we created some months ago. So if you see at the bottom of your screen for the online people, you see a folder that says study notes, and that leads you to other folders with dates, and you'll see the date of today's teaching, and all this is there. So if you want to do further research, you want to check the preacher, because don't believe in anything I say, check the citations, check the scriptures I'm giving you, and it's all there so you can see it. So Zechariah 8:12, then I will allow the remnant of my people to possess all these things. Furthermore, house of Judah and Israel, so this is God, right? Even though you used to be a curse among the nations, now I will surely save you, and you will be a blessing. And again in Jeremiah 4, we see the same, that the nations will be blessed, and through the people of God, the Jews. And we also have it in Psalm 72 and Isaiah 65, and you have the scriptures there for the online people. Yes. So Psalm 72, verse 1 and 17, for example, all the tribes of the earth shall be blessed in him, that is Abraham. All nations shall call him blessed. And Isaiah 65, which is that powerful chapter, if you remember, about the new heavens and the new earth. It's an incredible chapter if you read that whole thing. At the end of it, verses 15, 16 says, my servants, that is from the nations in verse 1, right, will be called by a new name, which shall be blessed on the earth, for they shall bless the true God, and they that swear upon the earth shall swear by the God of truth. So all these nations that did not, pagan, that didn't know God from the beginning, will be blessing the God of the Jews. That's an incredible scenario there. Any comments or questions at the moment? Am I going too quickly? By the way, we got that box in the car, right? On top of the box there are the handouts for at the end, if you can, when you can get them. Okay, so there's another element to this restoration of the nations which is interesting, which I hadn't noticed, and it's about the fact that God from the beginning gave pagan nations an inheritance. And you see that in Deuteronomy 2. And actually, let's go to Deuteronomy 2, because I don't know about you, but I didn't know this. I just found this out.
No, I didn't know.
So let's do a little bit of reading. We'll read this together. So Deuteronomy 2, the setting is the wilderness, the 40-year sojourn in the wilderness, right? These people have been punished once again because of their hard-heartedness, as Paul calls it. So if someone wants to start, maybe Michelle, verse 1, and we'll go around.
Then we turned and set out for the wilderness by the way to the Red Sea, as the Lord spoke to me, and circled Mount Seir for many days.
And the Lord spoke to me, saying, wow.
You can read the next one.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. And the Lord spoke to me, saying, you have skirted this mountain long enough. Turn northward.
And command the people, saying, you will pass through the territory of your brothers, the sons of Esau, who live in Seir, and they will be afraid of you. So be very careful.
Tom, no? I'll just jump to verse 5. Don't go to war with Edom, because I am not giving you any of their land, not even a footprint. Get this, for I have given Mount Seir as an inheritance for Esau. The next one.
Mine didn't say all that. That's
what did yours say?
do not provoke them,
Yeah.
for I will not give you any of their land, even as little as a footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as
Right.
possession.
The possession.
You
Verse-
shall buy food from them with money, so that you may eat, and you shall also purchase water from them with money, so that you may drink.
For the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hand. He knows you're trudging through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You have lacked nothing.
So we passed beyond our brothers, the sons of Esau, who live in Seir, away from the Arabah road, away from Elath and from Ezion Geber. And we turned and passed through by the way of the wilderness of Moab.
Okay, so I'll jump to verse 9. Thank you for pointing that out, Michelle. Some translations obviously vary, but we get the picture. It's not yours. It's their possession. The Hebrew there really should be inheritance, which is a stronger covenant language. So God did have a mini covenants, let's call it, with these pagan nations, and that was their land by inheritance. So if you jump to verse 9, do not quarrel with the Moabites. Do not engage in war with them, for I will not give you of their land for an inheritance, for I have given error, if that's the name, to the children of Lot to inherit.
The Emim lived there formerly, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim.
They were also regarded as giants like the Anakim, but the Moabites call them Emim. Okay, sure.
The Horites formerly lived in Seir, but the sons of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them and settled in their place, just as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave to them.
Now it's interesting, these nations that are described as giants, some scholars believe these are descendants of the Nephilim of Genesis 6 that did survive the flood, by the way. They didn't die out. There is I can't remember the verse that has it, but the flood did not get rid of the Nephilim. They did go on to survive. I may be wrong. I'll double check that. But
I never heard that.
okay.
Maybe because they're half angel, maybe something.
Right. Or some scholars also say it about this. So how, if God took care of them in Genesis 6, how do we still get giants? And so some simply say, well, maybe there was another outbreak of demonic or satanic mixing with them. We'll jump to verse 15 then. So the point here is the inheritance, right? He has given these nations, pagan nations like Edom, Moab, an inheritance. Verse 15. And when you enter the land of the Ammonites, now it's Ammonites, the descendants of Lot, do not bother them or start a war with them. I have given the land of Ammon to them as their inheritance. So that's basically the
I
point.
think that was verse 19.
I was going to say, I couldn't.
19.
Where were you?
Oh, is it 19?
19.
Yeah,
Sorry.
19. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
I
Okay.
know what you said because I was looking for it.
So that was verses 5, 9, and 19 are the key verses there.
Okay,
That
do you have
passage.
that?
So basically, the point is that this is why I'm calling this the restoration, right, as well as the conversion of the pagan nations, because the pagan nations from the beginning had an inheritance of their own, and God will reverse, and we'll look at how God will do it. He will reverse the fortunes, and we will look at that phrase which is used a lot, to the pagan nations as well as obviously his people Israel. Any comments or questions?
No comments.
I'm really
No,
surprised
this-
nobody wants to talk about those giants. I'm
This
just
is
shocked.
interesting. Well, maybe we want to stick to the
Yeah, we'll
subject.
stick
Yeah,
to
that's
the
right.
subject.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Except that I didn't get to read the scripture that says Zamzuman.
We didn't.
Zamzuman, verse 20.
Yeah.
What a name.
Okay, so the phrase reverse the fortunes, and that's the second slide there, is an umbrella term, like I was just saying, for God's dealing with these pagan nations, Moab, Ammon, Elam, and for other nations like Sodom and Samaria, and that's in Ezekiel 16. And so this is an umbrella term that God uses to point to the fact that he will reverse the fortunes and give not just his people, but the pagan nations back what initially was theirs. That's pretty amazing. So, I always had a view of the Bible, the whole Jewish story of, it's just God's people, and God's people are the ones. But no, God has a plan for the rest of the world. It's not that God will just, benefit one, not just race of people, but nation, but he will bring about full restoration. And this is how we're getting nations in the kingdom, right? So we will be kings and priests, reigning, not over ourselves, but over these surviving nations. And there will be continuing instruction via the temple, via the reinstitution in some form or another of Torah to the nations. And like I said, that's another subject. But the point is that there is a lot of work being done by the people of God, in this case, the nation of Israel and the nations per se, and so on. So the people of God, another thing that is amazing that I found was that, so if God is doing that, if this is true, if God is restoring not just the nations, but their inheritance, they will become the people of God themselves. Now, let's go to Isaiah and we'll read through Isaiah here. So Isaiah will tell us that these nations will become the people of God. They are spoken to as he speaks to his own people, Israel, and the Christian church. So if someone wants to read verse 16.
What chapter?
19, Isaiah 19.
66.
19:16.
Wait, Isaiah 19?
19, 1.
Oh.
Isaiah 19, and we'll start on 16.
Michelle,
Yeah, almost there. In that day the Egyptians will become like women, and they will tremble and be in dread because of the waving of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he is going to wave over them.
And the land of Judah will be a terror to Egypt. Everyone who makes mention of its will, of it will be afraid in himself because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he has determined against it.
In that day, 5 cities in the land of Egypt will be speaking the language of Canaan and swearing allegiance to the Lord of hosts. One will be called the city of destruction.
On that day, verse 19, there will be an altar. Get this. There's going to be an altar to Yahweh in the center of the land of Egypt, and a pillar to Yahweh near her border. 20.
It will become a sign and a witness to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt, for they will cry to the Lord because of oppressors, and he will send them a Savior and a champion, and he will deliver them.
Then the Lord will be known in Egypt, and the Egyptians will know the Lord in that day, and will make sacrifice and offerings. Yes, they will make a vow to the Lord and perform it.
The Lord will strike Egypt, striking but healing. So they will return to the Lord, and he will respond to them and heal them.
On that day, verse 23, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. Assyria will go to Egypt, Egypt to Assyria, and Egypt will worship with Assyria.
In that day Israel will be the third party with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth.
Whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed is Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance.
Now that's incredible. Now you can replace Egypt here with Israel. So if you rub out Egypt and you put Israel, this is like, a normal prophecy to Israel. And even the fact that they will be exiled or dispersed for 40 years is interesting. And that was in the first part of this chapter. It talks about them being dispersed for 40 years. So if you just rub out Egypt and put the nation Israel there, it's interesting. It's like supplanting the promises of his own people with Egypt. And not only that, as we know from history, Egypt and Assyria were mortal enemies of Israel. So this is the way he's dealing with not just a pagan nation, but a mortal enemy of his own people. But the point here is that I have always been told, I have always read that the God of the Old Testament is a vindictive, this guy, what's his name, the atheist, Dawkins? Richard Dawkins? He wrote this book, The God Delusion, I think it's called, and it starts out with a horrible paragraph of the God of the Old Testament is a vindictive, jealous, homicidal maniac. So, and I think a lot of people also have that view that the God of the Old Testament is not the God of love of the New Testament. That's the God of war, genocide, all these horrible things. But through these prophecies, which is the same God. God has the biggest heart ever for even pagan, mortal enemy nations. So he's got a plan. Why? Because I'm reminded of, I think, Ezekiel 26, I think, where it says, God says to the wicked, I don't want to destroy you. The wicked, he's talking to the wicked. He says, I don't want to destroy you. I find no pleasure in your destruction. Just turn. Stop doing wrong. Stop sinning. Stop, being mean to the poor. stop raping women, stop doing all these things that, just turn and I will heal you. And that sounds like the prophet Isaiah, right? In Luke 4, I think, Jesus says that, he came to heal. The gospel message he brings is to open eyes and to heal people, to make the lame walk, etc. And you can take that metaphorically. Obviously, it's literal, but you can also take it metaphorically, spiritually, as he will heal your heart. So this is an incredible chapter here. Just a couple points about the fact. What does that remind you of? Some translations in verse 25 have my handiwork. Do you remember that word from your New Testament? My handiwork? Paul refers to the Christians as God's handiwork in Ephesians. I think it's Ephesians 4. 2, sir.
2:10.
2:10. Can you read 2:10? So this is language being applied to not just the pagan nation, but the mortal nation of Egypt.
While she's looking,
Yes.
this isn't metaphorical for something else. This is truly Egypt of today, the national nation of Egypt and Assyria, whatever form.
Whatever nations
that
now
is,
inhabit
but
that area.
That area.
Yeah.
Yeah, because basically everybody over there outside of Israel is against
An
Israel.
enemy.
An enemy. So there really isn't. Whoever's over there at that time is still going to be an enemy. There's just no way.
This is going to be the true peace accord.
Right,
Finally.
yeah,
Finally,
the
there's
real
gonna be a
one.
peace accord.
Yeah.
Can you read the Ephesians?
For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good
Handiwork.
works,
Handiwork.
which God prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them. Yeah.
Right, can you read that again?
For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand
Prepare
so that we would
before.
walk in them.
So the plan
It's
was
already
already in
planned.
play. It wasn't like God was like vindictive from the start and he had no plan for anyone but Israel. No, so and if we go to actually I'll touch on this. If can you go to Matthew 26? We'll just quickly divert here because it has to do with this. If you go to Matthew 26, and it's about 25. Sorry. It's about the second coming, and just go down where it says when Christ comes and sits on his glorious throne, and he will judge the nations.
But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats.
Verses?
You keep on.
Yeah, what verses are you in?
31, 25,
25, 31.
31.
Yeah, keep on.
And he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, who are the sheep, "Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty, or give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" The king will answer and say to them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on the left, who are the goats, "Depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing."
Yeah, so we'll stop there. So you can see how this can be. So he's obviously speaking to the nations, and they're called sheep, and some are called goats. And he speaks to the nations, not the church, not his people Israel, with language that is applicable to us, to the saints. So it makes sense there if you read it that way. Others read it differently, I know, but it makes greater sense that it does say nations. He is dealing with them. I mean, these people don't know him. You know, Christians know, these people Israel know who God is. So yeah, so it makes sense. So the point there is that the language there about, you know, I prepared this for you before the creation of the world. So maybe that's an allusion to this plan that was already in place from Deuteronomy 2, right? He had already given pagan nations their inheritance. He had a plan for them, and now he's enacting, now he's doing good on that plan, as they say.
Can I make a
Yes.
small point, just in case there's confusion on this? Because I study this quite a bit. It says that the Son of Man has already come in his glory and his angels, and he's sitting on his throne. So that means the second coming, the resurrection,
Has
all
happened.
of us have already been changed in a twinkling of an eye. So this doesn't apply to us. We are not the sheep and the goats, those of us who have already been transformed into our immortal bodies. This is talking about those who are left, because it says he's already sitting on his throne, so that has to already happen. There's a lot of people that apply this particular, and I know that's not the topic of this particular passage,
No,
but a lot of people apply this to
the first.
to us.
Right.
And this
So
is
that's
definitely
what-
not.
right.
None of these folks are in the first resurrection.
That's a great point, because that is...
So it's a confusing point for a lot of people. So.
Well, yeah, but if you put it that way, you know, and we're reading the text here, obviously, that's what the text says. It says he sits on his throne. So obviously, these things have occurred.
Brought his angels
You
with
know,
him.
we have met him in the air. We have come down. We have sat with him. But the simple way is to just accept what it says, verse 32. All the nations will be brought, right? Verse 32, before him.
That's person by person too. If you think about it. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
could
so.
be.
I think each. So if we know somebody now that will live on into the kingdom, maybe they were a good person,
Right.
maybe they're a horrible person, but there will be a judgment for them. It's not going to be the same as our. They're not going to get our eternal reward, at least not at that time.
Right. And to be fair to the, I don't even know if it used to be the majority interpretation to read this as the saints, but I think now it's shifting, because recently I saw an article on this in Christianity Today, I think it's called, a couple of months ago. A major evangelical that made the point, we saw it the way we're seeing it. But to be fair, the language here is misleading people, because, for example, verse 34 is quite powerful Christian, my people Israel language. I have inherit the kingdom that I have prepared for you before the foundation of the world. Well, obviously people back when they read it differently, they said, well, obviously that's us, right? No, but we just went through the inheritance of
Well,
the
we're supposed to
nation.
be kings, leaders, teachers of somebody. I mean, God knew everybody wasn't going to be in that first
Exactly.
resurrection.
It
He
wasn't
knew there
a-
would be people, that's what the world was going to
Mhm.
turn into, a world under Jesus as the king,
Right.
with Satan bound up.
It wasn't a
And
bonfire.
He'd
what's
need
the-
some administrators, that'll be us, but there would be a whole bunch of people that are going to
Mhm.
not know how to live godly lives.
So, just to divert a little bit, it sort of makes more sense, that passage, if you read it in view of what we're looking at here, especially Deuteronomy 2, is, to me, it was quite opening chapter, because I didn't know about this an inheritance for Elam, Moab, these horrible, pagan nations, and so on. Any online comments?
Yeah.
Or
Brian,
diverting a bit?
I'm sorry. Some nameless person named Messianic Kentuckian says that all nations will be blessed through Abraham.
Mhm. Yeah, we read that in Genesis 12.
So that's
All
the
nations.
world. Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And somebody named T 2015
Yep.
says, thus proving that God is love, not what Dawkins
Richard
falsely
Dawkins.
claims.
The God Delusion, I think it's.
And
Can I just make a comment? It's not even, it's, yes, God is love. I'm not arguing that point. But God is just. I mean, more importantly, God is just. It's, we all talk about life isn't fair. God is fair. God is extremely fair. I mean, he tells you exactly what is expected and what the consequences are of not doing it.
Mhm.
That's, love is great, but there's no ambiguity in what you are required to do.
Right.
And he gives you
And generally, he gives you plenty of warnings.
lots and lots of
He
warnings.
certainly gave people Israel.
Yeah, I just want to make that out that, he's, even in the Old Testament, just.
As you say that,
Point on here that we're
Yeah.
not going to go into all of
Okay.
this, but
No, no.
some people are asking about the Nephilim and
See, I knew it'd
was
happen
Goliath part of the Nephilim.
if you go to
and
this,
so if you just tell somebody where to look, we don't know.
Yeah.
We who are manning the computers
Yeah.
have no idea.
on the fold or at the top of the website you're on right now, there's a little search box. Just type in Nephilim or giants or something like that, because Anthony has, obviously in his almost 60 years of Bible study, has pretty much dealt with most of it, and he will either direct you to good literature on whatever subject, and it's fine, Nephilim, or Sons of God. If you type in Sons of God Genesis, he either has something written on it or will lead you to other. Just on Judy's.
Hi.
I need more coffee. Just on Judy's great point about the parent God being just, and Michelle said, well, God also gives you plenty of warnings. And months ago, I thought about the parent situation. We're not parents yet. We hope to be. But parents, I think, it came to me because of all, we all have black sheeps in our families, siblings or sons or daughters that go bad, etc. And I was thinking, so I was looking at the Ten Commandments, and because Paul took me there. Paul says in Ephesians 4:1, I think it is, that this promise of inheritance that we are seeking, and our inheritance is greater than the
Right. We need to
converse pagans, because we're getting immortality.
Right.
They're not getting immortality. We're getting immortality. So that's why the exclusive nature of the Christian gospel and coming to Christ, etc. And I was thinking about that, and Paul says in Ephesians that promise is the only one applied to the commandment of honor your father and your mother. So I went and looked, not that I don't believe Paul, the apostle, but I went and read the Exodus, and it's true, It's the only one, not that all of God's laws hinge on it. Sure. But it's interesting that honor your father and mother, for this is where the promise hangs, so you can have a long life on earth. In other words, for anyone out there, and we all have our familial issues, siblings issues, I certainly have them, that's a powerful statement. That whatever, your parents do or whatever your children do, we got to keep in mind that, there's sort of a special thing that God puts on that. And I think it has to do with what you said, because the father or mother-child relationship, it's the closest thing to understanding God, the Father. Like with you, you've gone through your turmoils. You give them, look, don't do this, look, I love you, but, and we go through this process of sometimes very arduous, very heartbreaking, but that should help you understand the unseen God the Father's relationship with us. So.
And the fact that regardless, and this goes back to God is love, that regardless of what your children do and how bad it gets, you never stop loving your kid.
No.
God never stops. God doesn't, he may not like what we're doing, and we may be sinning, and he will not condone that behavior, and he won't accept that behavior, but he never stops loving us.
Well, look, I mentioned the Ezekiel passage where he talks to the wicked with a heart. His heart is breaking, God. Not that God is a man, obviously, but he's going, I don't want, he actually says, do you think I find pleasure in destroying you? I don't. So this is not a contra Dawkins, contra atheist or agnostic. This is not a vindictive, all-consuming fire God. This is a God that has compassion because they're His children. Even the wicked are His children. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies. Why? Because if God right now reigns on the wicked and the just, in other words, paraphrasing Jesus, who are you? Are you better than God? Are you greater than God not to love your enemy? Whatever they do or say to you. Anyway, I'm getting a bit passive here, but let's go back to the... So, you said about Egypt and Assyria. That's a good point, because one of the things that's important to note here is that this restoration going on, that will happen, does not cancel national distinctions. In other words, we have nations. We'll have the restored nation of Israel. We'll have the nation of Nicaragua, I hope. We'll have, whatever nation you hail from, if you're not from here. So we see that, and I'll just briefly run through this in the slide. Psalm 22, future generations yet unborn, there's a promise there. The princes of the nations are incorporated or joined with or to the people of the God of Abraham in Psalm 47:9. Again, the key words here is nations. These have national identities. Psalm 67, let the nations rejoice, shout for joy, for you judge the peoples with fairness and lead the nations on earth. Let the nations thank you, O God. So this does not cancel national distinctions, hence my first slide of all the flags there, all the UN flags. We also see this, let's read this one. This is Isaiah 2. If you can read Isaiah 2. This is a powerful passage. The Isaiah 2 is again of this restoration. And we'll do the first 4 verses there.
Want me to start?
Yeah.
The word which Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem.
Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it.
And many peoples will come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.
And the reference, again, Jeremiah 16 says the same. My Yahweh, my strength, my stronghold, my refuge in a time of distress. The nations will come to you from the ends of the earth. Now, I'm taking this literally, not just because some have so-called preterists, people who believe that all these things have happened and happened at 70 AD when the temple was destroyed. They read into this that it's just a geographical point. In other words, the prophets, all their promises only pertain to the Middle East. So what they knew as the world back then, right? So for example, the gospel will go out to the ends of the world. Well, the known world back then was basically the Middle East. That's what they claim. But I'll take this as from the ends of the earth, as it's written. Yes.
Well, I guess back to the preterist thing is, okay, then how do they explain verse 4?
Yes.
I mean, what happens to, I'll read verse 4.
Yeah.
He shall judge between the nations and rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Well, that has not happened anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere, anytime.
Exactly.
So where did that verse go?
So I'll read ends of the earth there as Nicaragua, as Australia, as whatever other. Jeremiah 16:19-21 also ends. Therefore I am about to inform them. This is verse 21. You don't have to go. 16:21. And this time I will make them know my power and my might. Then they will know that my name is Yahweh. This is a declaration to the nations once again. So I have a quote there from the ESV Bible study. I'll just share it here. That's the other. While Ezekiel seemed to have understood that foreigners could become members of the covenant community, Zechariah depicts them as simultaneously retaining their distinctive identities. In other words, although they are grafted into as the people of God, we saw each of my blessed people. Even though they're, grafted into the church, for example, they still have their national identities intact. So it's both. They become the people of God, but they're still Egyptians, they're still Nicaraguans, they're still Americans, etc. And that's a very important point. Again, this is all, the point here is about the nations. The world will continue. It's not just going to blow up and no more nations, we're in heaven. No, this is a continuation of God's great design for all of us, not just his little chosen people. Any comments, questions, objections?
Well, this is about God's love, what we were talking
Yes.
earlier about God's love. God is all about tough love, just as any loving father, what God tells us not to do is always for our own good. Somebody else says God's love can be either gentle or tough, it depends on the particular situation, gentle or tough. God is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. That's Ezekiel 34, 6 and 7. And then he says, yet, ... so there must be.
So, this whole unfolding of God's gospel.
Because I have a comment too.
Sure.
When you don't understand any of this, and you think all that's going to happen when you die is you're going to go to heaven, I mean, look how much of the Bible it discounts. Because who cares about nations or anything? If it's all this individual, I'm going to go to heaven and be with Jesus. Who cares what nation you are? Who cares what anything? I mean, it just is like tossing the Bible out. What's all this? Well, maybe they don't think this is just a storybook or just a history book or something. They don't realize how much of this is for the end and what's going to actually happen. Not just the end, the eternity, the rest of eternity.
The age to come.
Yes, yes.
Just on that, it always strikes me. I like movies. I'm actually studying to be a what they call film technician. But it's interesting to me, and I like science fiction movies. It's funny though, if you look at science fiction movies, it's all about leaving Earth.
Oh yeah.
Like there's
taking over the world. Everybody wants to rule the world.
That too.
Everybody wants to rule the world.
But in terms of science fiction, obviously it's about outer
Yeah,
space.
we all go into outer space.
For example, there's one coming up called The Martian. So it's about this Martian expedition to Mars, blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
It's actually a book. Just so you
is
know.
it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a real book. Yeah, I know. It's funny how that happens. People write books and then...
And make movies.
Yeah, they make movies. Who knew?
The weird thing is that we're talking about it in church.
I'm sorry. Okay, go on. Yes. We're still talking about the kingdom, thy kingdom come. And
My
yes.
point is, to Michelle's point, is almost that there has developed, because of the pagan influence in the Jewish Christian scriptures, a disdain for the earth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
No, let's get out of here.
Yes.
This is
yes.
pollution, right?
Right.
Global
Yeah.
warming. This is a mess. There are other nice worlds out there, but although they're yet to find life, even at the drop of water,
Right.
but it's a disdain, and what is that disdain for? God. God created this special. Look, scientists I'll say supposedly, because science is not an exact science, can see zillions, billions, whatever of galaxies. No life. Not one speck. If you look up like Abraham did, and Abraham looked up and God said, see all it's like the sand, right? Like the grains of
The stars are like the sun. Yeah.
So it's a total disdain on the part of a lot of the humanity, of our fellow women and of Earth, and just I call it ejecting Earth. And
Oh, I like that. And the other thing I want to point out is, and it goes back to Egypt, Assyria, whatever nation. I think it's very interesting, and I know we live in a present and evil age, but if you think about the promise of those lands, the inheritance, and then we go around, and I'm not saying that we should agree with what they say, but we disparage the people in those places because of their religious beliefs. I understand that they're pagans, and I understand that what they believe is, and I get all that. But it's kind of like we never think about the fact, or I never have, that at some point, some of those people from those lands are going to be in the kingdom.
Remnants.
So remnants. Yeah. So we're going around like, blow them out of the water, kill them, destroy. And I'm not saying we, but in the world, in the world, I mean, people just want to obliterate and disregard completely those countries. Mm-hmm. And I never really thought about the fact that they have an inheritance.
God has a remnant.
And I didn't, right? But you don't really think. Because you just
and you
don't
might be their teacher.
And you just don't. I don't think about that part. I just think about that. It's amazing that everybody has an opportunity, and that God doesn't shut the door on anybody. But that in our world and in our time, we just go around, get rid of them, blow them up, whatever.
God has a great plan for everyone who turns to even for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many by the way, Anthony has a great article called "The Ifs of Christianity." So it's not just people who are non-Christian, but us, and more so especially for us, because it says that the great judgment will begin by God cleaning house. I'm paraphrasing that. He'll clean his own house first, and then the rest. So we gotta be extra careful, because we say we hear, we say we see, we say we understand. So there's a greater element. So let's go back and just close up here. Let's go to Romans 11, and there's an interesting thing that God is doing. When I came to Christianity, it was interesting because God's way is not the world's way. And the big one for me was loving our enemies. I was in the security industry. I was a man of violence myself. But God goes, no, you have to act this way. And I'm like, what? So here it's interesting that the judgment of God, right, will bring about a reversal of fortunes, like the phrase, right? Reversal of fortunes. So if we go to Romans 11, we'll read from verse 11 here. Romans 11:11. Anyone who has it, and we'll go around.
Okay. And I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall?
The Jews.
The Jews. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes. Israel's I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Certainly not. But through their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to the Gentiles.
Now, if their transgression is riches for the world, and their failure is riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their fulfillment be?
13?
You.
11? No, you can do.
Oh, okay. But I am speaking to you who are Gentiles, inasmuch then as I am an apostle of Gentiles, I magnify my ministry.
If by any means I may provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh, and save some of them, the Jews.
Yep.
For if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead?
Okay, so we'll stop there. So this is an interesting thing, right? How God's working here. So he goes, okay, my people, Israel, I took it from them, right? These people are hard-hearted. I'll look, to make you jealous, people, right? I'll restore these nations, right? And through their restoration, you'll see that I'm a gracious God, that you should have done what I said. I'm a good dad, right? I'm a good dad. I'm not a bad dad. But, you have to repent. You have to come back to me. So this is an interesting reversal of fortunes on both sides. On the sides of the Jews and on the sides of the nations. So as a result of Israel's restoration, eventual restoration, right? God will fulfill the gospel promise. We go back to Genesis 12. There's a quote here from a commentary on Isaiah. I have the reference there. Again, if anyone wants all this stuff, it's on those folders I said. So this commentary says, they will be a blessing to the world, the Jews, a means whereby the blessings of God can come to all peoples, all nations, a means whereby the election of Israel is extended to everyone. And I think that's what Paul's saying in Romans 11. That God's great graciousness, I'm reminded of when God appears to Moses, and remember, I think it's in Exodus, he goes, I'll appear before you, right? And Yahweh says, I am loving to the many generations, I am great in abundance, great in love. It's true. This is all God's, revealing God's character here. God's character is one of loving kindness, I think it's the word some use. Okay, so what's in it? What's in it for the church, right? So what's in it for us?
What do I get out of
Right.
this?
What are we to make of all this? Well, I think we're pretty much through our comments. But the final point, the point that we should remember is that as the seed of Abraham, we must understand God's gospel plan. You talked about, I think Michelle said, maybe you will go to those, pagan nations and teach them, instruct them. Well, we have to know what we're teaching and instructing. So as the seed, we have to understand this, not just for the instruction, but to prepare ourselves for that great day that we may be found worthy, that we may qualify. And then I have a couple of verses here in 1 Peter 1:7. The point of your current trials is the testing of your faith, which is more precious than gold, which perishes even though it's refined by fire. The object is that your faith, your understanding of the gospel and submission to it, right, and obedience to it, may be found, guess what? In praise. So you will be praised for your faith. You will be made glorious. You will be honored for that faith. You will be given these things. Honor, glory, praise at the second coming of Messiah Jesus. That's 1 Peter 1:7. So what's in it for me? Romans 2:7. Those who have persisted in doing what is right and are seeking, guess what? The threefold, right? Glory, honor, and immortality. That's what we're seeking for. God will give life in the age to come, in the kingdom. What's in it for us? Well, let's see. Let's go. We'll finish with Matthew 19. So what's in it for the Christian church? We saw what the pagans, how God will deal with the quote-unquote pagans, the non-believers. Well, what's in it for the Christian church? Well, those verses, 1 Peter 1:7, Romans 2:7, immortality is, it's pretty good, right? It's a good start. But if anyone can start, Matthew 19:27, and we'll read a couple of verses.
Then Peter said to him, "Behold, we have left everything and followed you." Am I the right spelling?
Yes, yes.
And followed you, and then will there be for us? What then will there be for us?
So Jesus said to them, "Assuredly I say to you, that in the regeneration, rebirth of the world, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel."
29.
And everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or children, or farms, for my name's sake, will receive many times as much, and will inherit life of the age to come.
So, what's in it for the apostles? What's in it for us as their seed, their descendants? Well, not just immortality, which is, like I said, a pretty good start, but we get to administer, to govern, the nations. And it's interesting here, this is a very strong passage because it makes an interesting distinction between the Christian church and the nation of Israel. In other words, the apostles, the immortalized apostles, right, along with the saints, the rest of the Christian church, will govern, will administer, oversee other nations, right? So we got that picture clear. But for these Jewish apostles, right, they will oversee exclusively their fellow Jews, the restored nation of Israel, which is the 12 tribes. You follow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Follow that?
Yeah.
So that's their mission. That's what they're getting. They're getting to govern their own people, the 12 tribes of Israel, in the kingdom. And we will get our own, little piece of heaven, if I could call it that, in the kingdom. So that's an aspect of the gospel that I didn't know to be. It's the preacher, whoever preaches or teaches, is the one who learns the most. And that's what I learned throughout all this, that there's a sort of two-step process of, you got the Christian church, the saints that the New Testament calls them, we got the restored nations, and you even got the restored 12 tribes, so the restored nation of Israel. But they will be overseen exclusively by the 12, it looks like, right? No one else but by the 12. So that's God's plan, and I'm happy with that. And yeah, so any comments, any objections, any misinterpretations?
Well, it's not, none of this is about what we but God's intention for mankind in Genesis brought to fruition. Matthias.
All right.
But
Well,
this Isaiah, when we were studying Zechariah, and this in Isaiah, the end of Zechariah talks about the nation. What was it? 14:6 was it?
16.
Because
The survivor.
that really struck me to the point where I thought we gotta look all that up. And then here you're talking about the very same thing. Because I think at the time you said, wait a minute, the gospel is going to be preached to all the nations and then shall the end come. But that's not what this was about. This was the nations. That's after the gospel was preached. The nations are going to come to Jerusalem, not to learn the gospel per se, because the kingdom's already there, but they're going to come to meet Jesus. And there's plenty of places that it talks about that. The end of Isaiah 66, which, you covered it, but they will bring all the brethren from the nations, and they will come. Anyway, but if you read all that through there, the end of Isaiah 66, 18 on, they will come to see the glory of the Lord. And they're going to come to Jerusalem because they want to come to the capital city. They want to meet Jesus. They want to see him. It always says, see my glory. Well, it means to see him. They're going to come. And all these people, they're just learning about this whole Christian thing, or Jesus, and for the very first time. Possibly, I would assume that.
I think you're right.
And so they're going to come to they're supposed to come keep the feast too, or at least the Jewish ones are. I'm not sure who else will be keeping the feast. But it says those who don't come to keep the feast are going to have some problems.
Yeah, no rain.
So we know there's going to still be judgment on people and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, to me, I just sort of struck me as, I always like learning a little bit more about what the kingdom will be like. Just every time I learn a little bit more, it just puts it all together for me.
Yeah.
And that at the end of Zechariah tied with the end of Isaiah, just really was like, people are just going to want to come and meet Jesus. They want to come see him,
Right.
and meet the 12 tribes. And I sure hope we can meet Moses and Abraham, and maybe we will, because we will be immortal and they will be immortal. But this is just the people.
Well, we read, just to piggyback on that, people coming to Zion or Jerusalem, the restored Jerusalem.
Because it's the capital, but the kingdom's going to be the whole world.
The whole world.
They're just going to come to the capital in
But
whatever form it takes.
It's not just about them coming, but it's also, I think you read in Isaiah, it's about also the law of God going out from from.
Well, that means it's the capital city.
Right.
I mean, that's where the
So-
capital from Washington D.C.
Yeah.
go with forth our
Right.
laws.
Right.
So you could live in California and never have been to Washington D.C., but still be obeying a law that came from Washington D.C. So the people are going to be far away. They want to come to the capital. They want to come to the mountain of the Lord. They want to come see the glory of Christ and the whole setup.
And learn His ways, right? Learn His ways and.
Right, because some of them are not going to have a clue. They want to be
Right. So it's a very I think important obvious subject of it's an important element of the gospel. You know, we all have this idea of yes, a great day is coming. Yes, I'll get life in the age to come forever and ever and ever. Yeah, but what are we? You know, I think the last talk I did was the title was, you know, what basically what we'll be doing. What, you know, apart from what's in it for us, what's our mission going to be?
What will it be like, and what are we going to be doing?
Exactly. There's a lot that will go on, you know. So it's not a what's that phrase?
It's not a burning party.
Yeah, it's not a burning party of all the wicked or everyone who's associated with the wicked. It's not a total cleansing of the world. Oh, and just another point. There are elements to God's prophecy of total destruction. In other words, there are verses, I can't.
Well, what we read in Matthew, the sheep and the goats. The goats are going to receive eternal punishment,
Right.
it says. Now, we know
Right.
that doesn't mean they're going to burn in flames forever and ever and ever and ever.
Right. Well, my point was going to be.
On the earth, there's going to be.
Yeah, my point was that, for example, there are declarations about Egypt in the Old Testament that God says, "I will wipe you out completely, Egypt." But obviously, that's not. You know, it shouldn't be taken so woodenly as a blanket statement, because obviously there's a surviving nation of Israel. But He does say that God in very emphatic. So I guess I could call it maybe colorful language. You know, wipe you out completely, but obviously not completely. There are remnants to all the nations. But maybe you can read that as, I will wipe out all the wickedness from you. And I will cleanse you could look at it that way. But again, my point is that, remember, this is a ancient Near Eastern worldview book. This is a Jewish worldview book. We shouldn't take everything so woodenly. So, for example, I just gave this lesson of surviving nations, but someone might read one of those verses like, wait a minute, but it says Egypt will be totally annihilated. What do you mean? Well, you know, it's both, right? He'll annihilate totally the evil from that people.
Mm-hmm.
He says similar things to Israel, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I will totally annihilate you, but obviously the evil among you. You know, it's a cleansing thing more than. So we shouldn't read scripture so woodenly and be more flexible with the word of God in the prophets. So I think if anyone doesn't have any.
Well, I just looked at the computer, so there's some sort of discussion.
Is there?
Whether it's exactly on the topic, I'm not sure.
Again, if there's any topics apart from this, like the Nephilim, do the little search. If anyone sees the little search box, type in "Sons of God," "Flood," Noah, whatever, and you can go to.
And all your, again, just those are where it says study notes, below the picture of you there, it says study notes. All these scriptures that you talk about today will be in there. And is that there all week?
Yes.
When we close this,
always.
that's still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are folders there from last year. So
It stays there forever. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and read.
It's the age.
It's eternal. Till the end of
Till the
it.
end of the age.
Also, the blog. There's also a blog. If you can go, and there are notes as well. So the blog, I point to the blog if you want to copy or please share this. This is not like copyright or anything. This is public
Domain.
Yeah.
You have the name of the blog on there?
Yes, it's on the links. When we finish, we'll put back the link, so you can do it now.
Okay. So this I don't know who T2015. I think this is
A
his-
new
Do
person.
you know who that is?
Mhm.
His or her first? I'm assuming it's a him, but
No, it's a her.
it's a her.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
It's a
I know.
new-
Okay, I'm sorry.
New street.
Sorry, T. Didn't mean to assume you were a guy.
2000.
She says, question, how do we as Christians address or respond to those that hate Israel and their accusations against Israel? Jerry says there's a large difference between Israel and the Zionist state that occupies Palestine today. Corey says Romans 11:20-36 talks a lot about that. Christians should not be vain in their faith. And then T's 2015 says, what is this difference? I guess to Jerry. Zionists believe in land conquest, correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all about the land.
T says, but the land Israel occupies has been given to them by God, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Jerry says, sorry, I didn't mean to make this a political discussion. Research Zionism. Corey says, it has been given, wait, I lost my,
Mhm.
just a minute, my thing walked away.
If I can just deal with the how do we deal with anti-Semitic basically people? Yeah, someone mentioned Romans 11:28. Though they are the present Jews enemies, says Paul. Doesn't mean Paul. Okay, that doesn't mean Paul was anti-Semitic because Paul was a Jew.
He was a Jew.
But they are enemies of the saving gospel. This is to your advantage, believers, Christians. They, the Jews, are still, guess what? The chosen people. And loved because of their forefathers. So remember, they're enemies of us, and we're supposed to love our enemies, so don't go and make war with them. And also remember, although right now they're enemies, they're not sympathetic, they don't believe in that Jesus was the Messiah, that's the big thing, but through them come the promises. So that's how we should do
Yeah,
it.
they're the people of God in his heart, but right now,
Yeah.
I even read through some of these things, that God's giving them a punishment because they have.
Well, they've turned their back. They've got
Turned his back.
hard-hearted
Just,
again.
yeah.
They've
just
turned
like
their
the
back.
pagan
Yeah.
nations.
Yes.
Yeah, they're
But
Yes.
the fact is,
They're still God's chosen people.
God, for some reason, and we can ask him, he chose that nation. He chose Abram and made a nation called
Yeah,
Israel.
exactly.
Because Abram was not a Jew, obviously. And look, through them come the promises. That's it. So they're enemies right now, and we don't fight our enemies. We don't kill our enemies. But through them come. That's
But
bullshit.
what my point is that there are some people, such as, I'm going to drop a name, Glenn Beck, who
Yes.
says nothing horrible is ever going to happen to
Yes,
Israel.
yes.
God's going to
These-
protect
the
Israel, his
Zionists,
people.
yes.
Well, that's
no.
absurd. There was a Holocaust. That's an absurd
And we know it's going to
assertion.
be even worse. And it says in the Bible that there will be a captivity
Right.
and that there will be punishment. So even though his people, we know God punishes his people to purify them.
Mhm.
So just want to
Well, it's
mention
not just, I mean, God
Uh,
punishes anybody that doesn't.
that. Okay, so Corey says, it has been given to Abraham and his descendants as an inheritance forever, i.e. the kingdom of God. Messianic Kentuckian says, those who obey God, this is my son, listen to him, parentheses, and those who don't. T says it's not just a political issue, it's a religious one. But anyone that goes against Israel is also going against God, right? And then Sarah says, Israel in the Mideast is, as Jerry says, far different from the international true Israel of God.
Right.
There is no salvation for anyone outside of Christ, as we know. And we know national Israel is not embracing Christ.
Right.
But we do know, as Anthony has taught us bazillions of times, that we, and it's, of course, we will be we are the true Israel of God.
Descendants
But us
of-
Christians are the true Israel of God. And if somebody doesn't understand that concept, they would not understand the Israel, non-Israel
Right.
thing.
The Zionists, I
yeah.
think they're both Zionists.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, that wasn't me. That was Dad.
I'm just saying who is.
Because he's speaking as.
Oh, yes.
So when it's
All
it
right.
says
He's writing. He's actually.
RF is the buzzers.
oh,
They
because
took-
I'm like, wait a minute. Now Barbara says
We're
something
Carlos
here too.
Sarah,
Hang
yeah,
on. All
Sarah.
right. Should go against Israel. So
They took my.
I'm sorry. I think you should look
Can you?
But
Sarah,
Israel in the
can
Mideast,
help
as Jerry says. So this is Anthony saying, okay. Israel in the Mideast is, as Jerry says, far different from the international true Israel of God,
Mhm.
who are us. There is no salvation for anyone outside of Christ, as we know. I wondered, I didn't see you typing over there.
Yeah.
Then T says true, but only God knows what is in the hearts of men. Messianic says Israel has gone against God in rejecting Jesus as the Messiah. The Israel of God has accepted Jesus as Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
But does that not mean that we as Christians should go against Israel? Right? Confused. This is T 2015.
What do we mean by go against Israel? Let's clarify what going against Israel is.
Well, there's a lot of churches, a lot of people say that the Jews killed Jesus, so they don't like the Jews.
And
because
Romans.
Because
and,
the Jews
yeah,
killed Jesus.
Okay.
I mean, I've heard
Right.
that. I presume that's something along that line.
Okay.
2,000
years ago.
Kentuckian says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Jerry says, we as Christians don't need to go against anyone per se.
Mm-hmm.
LOL.
Right.
Okay, now Anthony says, Barbara adds, it is very spiritually healthy to remember daily that we are God's handiwork.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Kentuckian says, stand against Israel that is disobedient to God. And I lost my place there again. Okay, stand with Israel that is obedient to God.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Okay, can I pause you there? Before I forget, there is a handout for the people here, which is also on the blog site I mentioned for further reading. And actually, let me read if I can get.
Here.
All right. So before I forget, so this handout is as a JPEG or a picture on the blog, and it's basically. I found this summation. This is a great summation, I think, of what we're doing. So I'll just briefly read bits of the first one, Judging the Nations,
Okay.
the Bible and Other Faiths. This person really sums up Ida Glazer. It says the Old Testament focuses on the judgment of Israel, but there are also many passages about the judgment of the other nations. That's what it was. In the context of our questions about the salvation of people of different religions, it is helpful to ask why the nations come under God's wrath. And we know why. There's pride, etc., etc. Then if I go down here, so there's wickedness. You see that in paragraph 3, spreading terror, amassing riches, complacency. Paragraph 4, pride is often mentioned. It's interesting. In summary, the prophets tell us that the nations are judged for obvious wickedness, for war crimes in relation to Israel. Interesting, we're talking about the Holocaust. For the arrogance that makes itself equal to God. This reassures us that God will not overlook wickedness, as you said, that He will vindicate His own people, and that Yahweh is the Creator God of all the nations. Sarah, can you read that paragraph there? What about the nations' gods?
None of the above reasons for judgment relates directly to the nation's religion. Although the prophetic books contain a great deal about Israel's idolatry, they say little about other nations' worship of their gods. In several places it is pointed out that these gods cannot save, and the later parts of Isaiah mock them as lifeless and useless. But what about judgment?
Keep going.
The judgment of a nation is sometimes seen as the defeat of her gods. Jeremiah sees it as punishing both gods and kings, or as putting the gods to shame. Nahum speaks of the destruction of Nineveh's idols.
I'll just move to the other paragraph on the other column. What about the nations? So if you see the underlined body, careful reading shows that God has compassion on these pagan nations and intends to restore and bless many of them. There is also great beauty, the following underline, there is also great beauty in the nations such as Tyre and Egypt, and their destruction causes anguish to the prophets, and we infer to God. Right? That's what I said. It hurts God to do this. And then I'll move down. Yahweh healing the Egyptians and answering their prayers. The chapter ends, this is Jeremiah 12. The chapter ends with a future blessing from Yahweh Himself. Blessed be Egypt, and we read that. And so at the bottom there, God plans to bless them as well as to judge them, and that's the interesting dichotomy. And on the back, there's a Another great quote from the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament on Revelation 21. Now this is just further reading, further study, because the reason I chose these passages is because of the wealth of citations. There's scriptural citations. I'll just read a bit of the theological here. It's important to note that Isaiah exhibits, I like to say, theological agenda that included the inclusion of Gentiles in the people of God. And then at the bottom there, the pilgrimage of the kings, as Michelle was mentioning, they will come to the New Jerusalem. Guess what? Presupposes the existence of the nations of the world and their rulers, as well as the location, what you said, Michelle. It's the great capital.
And that they have free will.
Right.
Because they can choose to
Exactly.
not come.
Right.
We're not dragging them there.
We're still not robots. And note this, I like this 4-step thing that they give here. There are similarities with what the Bible says with other Jewish,
Revelation 19.
and other Jewish, that's a Jewish source, Sib or, that's another Jewish source. But it's interesting that they have the same sort of view. The kings of the peoples attack Jerusalem, we know this. God defends Jerusalem, annihilates the attackers, right? But this is, we have to look at it as a totality, not totally annihilation, although that comes to mind. Point 3, Zion is restored. Point 4, the inhabitants of all the islands and cities, which alludes to the nations, will recognize the rulership, sovereignties of the world. Anyway, so that's the blog spot, those quotes and
Yeah, the thing that we're reading from
Yes.
is in the notes. So people will
So
have that.
just
Right.
Alrighty, so we'll close it up there. I think, I hope,
Yeah, somebody came
Keep
on
the
called The
word-
Spirit of Truth with a lot of things about the parable of the sower or the fig tree.
I
And
think that's,
it's just not the topic that we're on exactly
I think,
right now.
yeah.
So I guess Bob and Kay just hopped on in too.
Oh, they did? All right,
Due to
let's do it again.
thunderstorms.
We'll go from there.
Well, they would, because of the thunderstorms.
You're right.
they're just-
Oh, they didn't have,
This will all be online this afternoon.
the sermon, the
Today's
video,
study.
yes?
Today's study.
I'll put it up later and remember, put up the link please again. Remember our YouTube page? We're nearing 600 videos. We're up to 578. A ton of, we're trying to deal, we get obviously a lot of email. We're trying to deal with all subjects. You know, people have different, good questions about different matters of faith and etc. And Anthony tries to deal with all that and more. Would you like to
I'm gonna
close?
close.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not going to song.
Oh, we're doing a song?
If you want to.
All right, and then you can close with prayer.
Jerry has to come upstairs and sing with us.
Yeah, we need Jerry.
Jerry.
We need a song is what we really need.
My son's in the folder here. I'm not sure if he's here. Yes. Oh, there he is.
What are we saying?
It's Surely Goodness and Mercy, otherwise known as A Pilgrim Was I and A Wandering. It's easy.
Just one page.
I
Is it one page song?